You're listening to a Bespoken media production.
You're listening to New Frontiers, brought to you by Scotland's Veterans Wellbeing Alliance. I'm Hannah Utley.
And I'm Richard Henderson.
New Frontiers is a podcast that shines a light on the amazing charities across Scotland that are supporting veterans and their families to thrive on Civvy Street.
And in this bonus episode, we're joined by Dr Linda Irvine Fitzpatrick to talk through some of her own highlights from the first 3 episodes. Linda, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi Richard, hi Hannah. It's really lovely to be here today. So I'm Dr Linda Irvine Fitzpatrick. I am the strategic lead for Scotland's Veterans Wellbeing Alliance. What on earth does that mean? That means that I make sure that I am connecting with all the organisations across Scotland. And guess what? There's always more to come. So what you've heard in the podcast series is just a small part of the community of organisations that work across Scotland to support veterans. And the great thing about the Alliance is our door is never closed. So anybody listening to this, if you want to find out more, if you want to join our Alliance, please do join us. And you can find out more on svwa.org.uk. I'm also based at Edinburgh Napier University, so I work in the Centre for Military Research, Education and Public Engagement. That's like the longest title ever. We do lots and lots of different research and open up educational opportunities for the Armed Forces community to come and join us at Napier. We're a great team. It's a joy to work here, particularly as we're based at Craiglockhart campus.
Now, just to remind you, here are some clips from our first 3 episodes.
It's really important because the garden can be used by a lot of people in many different ways.
It's the feel-good factor. I've never been into gardening ever. I feel that it's gave me my life back, if that makes any sense. So it's working for me. It worked better than tablets. You know, going to the medication, going to the doctors, it's better than that. So I'm just going to keep coming and doing the good work, and it's nice to be in a good place.
You know, to be gay in the military didn't become legal until the 5th of January 2000. And the biggest factor was I felt safe where I was, but not who I was, because I was someone different. We're now in 2025 and we're still not quite there, but if you're part of the LGBT plus veterans community, there is loads of support out there for you.
I think when the average member of the public thinks about a veteran, they think about an older man who served in the army with a blazer and a tie and a rack of medals.
Everybody thinks of a veteran as a man in a black blazer with his medals and a beret on.
What a veteran is, they'll tell you it's a male that's 60, that served in the forces.
Veterans come in all sorts of different guises, and sometimes we wear dresses and lipstick. We're not all war veterans, we're armed forces veterans. Some of us haven't seen any conflict, but we still served.
The Breakfast Club's something to get people out, meeting each other. There are different ways of doing it. This is probably one of the better ones, more informal. We're not turning up expecting to be regimental or senior rank or all the rest of it. We're all just people meeting to have a breakfast and a chat and meeting each other. And because of that informality, that I think makes it more something to come and get together with.
So there was a lot to listen to in the last 3 episodes. A lot of interesting stuff came out from a lot of really good organisations and people. Linda, what were your thoughts when you were listening to the stories from some of the organisations and the people involved there?
I think it just never ceases to amaze me how creative and innovative the organisations are in terms of supporting people. Regardless of what your experiences are, there's always something to support people. And whether that's being in Lindburn Garden, whether that's being supported by the wonderful Rock to Recovery, some of the work that our other partners do that maybe weren't featured on these episodes, It's just incredible. So I think whatever it is that you're interested in, what the Alliance does, we'll always make sure we can match what your needs are, what your likes and dislikes are, with a service that will be able to support you.
Yeah, I think that's something that came through those conversations, wasn't it? That you have to try new things to find something that works, and it might be that you try something and it's not for you, and that's okay. But there's more options that you can try. Something different, that another pathway, another route, another activity, another charity might fit you and your needs better. And I think that was really something that came through, wasn't it, in terms of kind of what Callum was talking about from Rock to Recovery, a lot of, their approach being quite different to maybe clinical models, for example.
Yeah, and the thing is, everything's a school day, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the thing is, with all the organisations as well, there's flexibility there. We're learning and they're learning from the veterans that they're working with, and that in itself helps develop the service and support a bit better for everybody. And I think the main thing is to make sure that things do change and things do get better. And I think that came across from everyone that we spoke to about the positive outcomes that they had through their journey.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think you touch on something really important there, Richard, because it's really essential that the Alliance is listening to the experiences of veterans. And that's why we've funded the development worker, Stephen, to reach out to veterans across Scotland and make sure that there are forums and meetings where they can come and talk about what's important to them. All of that information will then be fed back into the Alliance so that services can adapt, or we can change what we do in order to fit the needs of what people have said is important to them. And I don't think we can underestimate how powerful that is, because the Alliance will only be successful and will only continue to grow if we're actually delivering what people need and what's helping them.
Yeah, and I think you're right, that work that Stephen is doing at CAPS, that advocacy stuff, we as all the charities and the wider Alliance, we've got to, I guess, be kind of humble enough to take that feedback, don't we, and change and develop what we're doing and learn from what people are telling us and what people want from us, rather than, I guess, assuming that we're the experts and we know best.
Completely, yeah. And I think what you said, Hannah, as well, about being able to try things, because I know that, I'd never gardened before I moved to a house that had little planting boxes, and I started to grow flowers, and every morning I just look out the window and I see these flowers and I think, oh my goodness, I have made these happen.
Yeah.
That's incredible. But I never thought I would be a gardening type of person. So I love to listen to the experience of people have had at Limburn, and what Charlie was saying about the work that the Defence Garden Scheme are doing. And I've always been interested in guerrilla gardening, which is where you just take pieces of brown land and turn them into gardens. I think that's something that veterans would be really good at.
Yeah. I think that it's the a few people that we spoke to touched on, isn't it? It's that thing of practicing failure and also being part of something bigger than yourself, that by the growing of something and that kind of gardening process, you are getting used to trying new things, as you say, and learning and learning that it's okay if something goes wrong, it doesn't quite work out, you can just try again. And that sense of being part of something that's bigger than yourself, of service, I suppose, to something bigger, which came through in some of those interviews as well, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I remember the first time I went out to the garden, actually, and I'm not green-fingered at all. I only have plants in the house now because I recently got married and they came with my wife. So I now have greenery in the house. And I have to say, it does make me feel a little bit better. And I do go, oh, that's going very well. Look at the leaves on that. Things that I would never have thought about before. But the first time when I went out to the Limburn Wall Garden, I was having a look around, and it was still, I know it's evolving all the time, but it was still very much underdeveloped at that time. So I walk around and I'm trying to be knowledgeable in front of Laura, and I said to Laura, oh, is that a cabbage you're growing there? And she went, no, that's a weed. We're digging it up next week. And I suddenly realised I need to just keep quiet about this,
Yeah.
But the good thing is I've gone back and I've seen how, with the Defence Garden Scheme courses that they've ran there at the Limburn, and I've seen the development that they've been involved in as well, in their own journey, and also the benefit of the garden for everyone else. It really hits at home the importance of it. And as Charlie mentioned as well, you don't have to be a gardener. Just go and have some space, speak to other people, have a brew and a wet, and just, talk rubbish. Just get it out your head.
I think that's what I come back to all the time, is the activity doesn't really matter in a sense. It's the doing of something and the being with other people and that community and that connection that matters. You could be doing gardening or theatre or arts and crafts or any number of the other things we'll talk about, I'm sure, in future episodes, but it's being together with folk and connecting that is the key, isn't it?
Because nature works. It just works a little bit slower than what we expect, because we live in such a high-paced society. We're looking for an instant fix on something. So it takes a little bit longer, but it does work, and we know it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sense of community really comes up in all of the podcast episodes, but also that sense of connecting. So connecting to one another, but also connecting to the past and looking to the future. So like the example of the garden, I remember looking at it too when it was just a complete overgrown mess, and then thinking this used to be a market garden for the house, and a vegetable garden and a herb garden. How incredible that we're bringing it back into being this functional space where we're growing things that people can eat. So we're contributing to a sustainable economy, we're contributing to people eating well, we're letting the kids come in from the nurseries to see how food is actually growing. It's just incredible. So that sense of like looking backwards in order to look forwards. And I'm saying that as we're sitting here in these amazing surroundings at Craiglocker at the Edinburgh Napier campus, in the Wilfred Owen room, named after the poet Wilfred Owen. And I know we're going to be talking about arts and things in the next episodes, but just keep coming back to that sense of past, but learning from the past, because a lot of what used to happen on this campus was there was beautiful gardens, there was a huge horticultural projects, and some of our aspirations is to bring that back here. So watch this space.
Brilliant. And we'll all look forward to seeing how that develops as well. Because we talk about when we had the VE, the Victory in Europe Day, there was so much conversation around that about not forgetting the past. But there's a prime example of where we have forgotten. Yeah. Where we've let things slip or we've given up. And is that just because, new ideas came along and they forgot that the old ones still worked? I don't know the answer to that, but I do think it's important that we do keep learning and we do keep remembering.
Yeah, and I think if we don't have those anchors, it can leave us as individuals feeling a bit unanchored, a bit rudderless, I guess. And if you're someone that has come out of the military and you are looking for where do I fit in within the society, finding those ways that you can connect, like you're saying, Linda, to the past, but the past in a really specific place where you are and how that can connect into your future, I can imagine would be quite comforting, I suppose, and give you that kind of grounding and connecting that people are often looking for in that moment.
And we all tell stories. That's what always strikes me. The stories that we've heard coming through this podcast, people's different voices, all our own experiences. And once you start to share some of that, I think that's when you really get that sense of what the Alliance is all about, is if we all come together, we'll be bigger and better than the sum of our parts.
Absolutely. I think one thing that was, for me, that came out of the VE Day conversations, I think it was with Steve and Richard, was this idea of if we lose the peace or the relative peace maybe that we've got in the world today, does that devalue the sacrifice that the men and women who have lost their lives in, not just in the First and Second World Wars, but other conflicts, does it devalue that? And I thought that was a really interesting thought, because as I was listening to that episode, or as to those conversations, I was thinking about what is the relevance of VE Day today. There's so few people alive that can remember that. There's, there are young people performing at that event that maybe don't have living relatives that remember it, and thinking about what is the relevance of it, and if we lose that piece, does that devalue their sacrifice? And I found that to be a really interesting thought that I had.
Yeah, I think you're right, and personally I think it would. I think you have to remember the sacrifices, because we're only here because of these sacrifices. Our society is formed because of these sacrifices. We have the opportunities that we've got is because of these sacrifices. And to not acknowledge that, I think would be criminal. I think we have to remember that. And that was the great thing about that day, was seeing the generations that were there. And it was passed down, and it's passed down in a positive way. It wasn't a negative day. It was a day of celebration. Yes, there's time for reflection, but it wasn't seen as a negative. And I think that's very important, because a lot of the time when, civvies will think of veterans, they'll think they're damaged, or they're broken. And that's not the case. There's a lot of positive things and positive work that veterans do and get involved with in society. And I think it's too easy to focus on that negativity rather than, the triumphs that they have and the contributions that they make.
Yeah. I think that came out in your conversations with Dougie, didn't it? Talking about sort of the effects of the so-called gay ban in the military and things like that, and his stance being that, these people are good at their jobs and they've got skills, and we shouldn't, we have to kind of let people, I think he said something like, if people, they're good at their job, so let them get on with it, and everybody's different and we need to value and celebrate that difference, and let people do the things that they're good at and celebrate that.
One thing I want to go back to, because we touched on it earlier on when we talked about what Steve's doing with CAP's advocacy. There'll be a lot of people that don't fully understand what advocacy is, and how important that is, especially to the development of the Alliance. Linda, you're probably best placed to put that in simple terms for myself to fully understand and others listening.
In simple terms, so when I talk about advocacy, I always like to use the word independent advocacy, because that's one of the strengths. So CAPs provide independent, individual and collective advocacy. What does that mean? Basically, they don't provide any services, so they have no conflict of interest. So they are all about facilitating groups of people to come together to create a space that is owned by these people so they can talk about what's important to them. So it's not about me coming as the Alliance saying, I want us to focus on A, B or C. I'm hoping they will invite me into their space, but that's their decision to make. But what I will guarantee is we will hear what they say and what they're saying and make sure that we listen to that in the Alliance. But we don't want to dictate what they talk about, because that's not our place to do so.
So it's to get a truthful, unbiased voice.
And it may be that there's 100 different voices within that. And that's okay, because this is about people's different voices, people's different experiences. When people have served, I'm sure there's a million stories there, a million different experiences. And collective advocacy gives the opportunity for folk to come together and talk about what's the shared experience as well as what's our individual experience, and how does that shared experience then influence change across society. I mean, I've worked in mental health provision for the last over 30 years, and one of the things I'm most proud that I did was to support individual and collective advocacy, because too often it's marginalised people's voices that are not heard for whatever reason, for a myriad of reasons. So I think I'm really proud to have been able to support the development of collective advocacy for veterans in Scotland.
Very much so. And I think that's a great approach. It's very different, I suppose, from when you look at the commercial world, where you make a product and then you spend the rest of your time trying to sell that product to society and get them to buy into it. Whereas, you're looking at it from another way here, where we're listening to what's required and services are being adapted accordingly and supports being put in place accordingly.
Yeah. And I think you're right in what you say, that it's got to be about giving a voice not only to those who are the most heard, but those who are the most unheard as well, and those voices that are marginalised or just aren't given a platform, the people that don't have the privilege, I suppose, to usually to be able to take the time to speak out or to be heard, or don't have the facility to do that. I think that's really important, so that we get new voices as well, and not just the same voices every time, kind of reinforcing what we already think and believe.
Yeah, I think Steve was telling me he'd spoken to over 180 veterans, but the majority, I think, or all of these veterans were already connected in to services and supports. So our next challenge is, how do we reach people who are not connected in? How do we get to these places? And again, I think language here is really important, because not everybody identifies with the word veteran. So what do people want to be called? Do people want to talk about being ex-forces? Is that a better way that people would feel more comfortable describing? Because if that is the case, then we have to hear that. Because if we've got Scotland's Veterans Alliance, but people don't identify with the term veterans, then we're not going to be as successful as we want to be.
I mean, I personally prefer the term ex-forces, because veterans, to me, it just sounds very American. And I do think World War II. And I know, Paul, you mentioned it, and we've mentioned it before about, the blazers, the medals, and that's correct. That is the image that you get, but that is not the image of our military. You know, they have their days and their ceremonial days like that. Of course we need that. But on the whole, there's a lot of people there that wouldn't consider themselves veterans, but they are ex-forces.
Yeah, and important to emphasise that the definition of veteran is anybody who served one day. So that's really important for people to hear. So all of our services, all of our support is open to anyone who's served one day.
And one of the other things as well that I thought was when we were up at Lothian Veterans Centre and we were talking to the women up there and their stories, I wasn't fully prepared. I thought in my head that there would be slightly different issues, but I didn't. And you know, is it a bad thing? I just wasn't aware. I was ignorant to really what female veterans or females in the military had been subjected to over the years. Because you think there's a little bit of banter there, you know, between the sexes, but it goes way beyond that, and it's systematic, really, wasn't it? I mean, where do you go?
Yeah,
There's no
and I
support
think
around you.
something that was quite interesting just towards the end of that conversation, I think, was around the conversation of why that kind of project that happens at LVC, why that is really important. I think it's this idea that often female veterans, and I suppose this probably applies to any other kind of marginalised group within the veterans community, they're often discouraged from accessing the quote-unquote mainstream support out of fear, whether real or imagined fear of being discriminated against within those groups, and the threat of and the existence of still kind of sexism and misogyny and kind of patriarchal systems within the existing support systems was I felt like that was quite a confronting idea to actually sit with, to be honest.
Yeah.
To think about our role in that, I suppose.
Yeah. And you can see how things have progressed. Slowly, but it's progressing. Yeah. And you can see what's happening to the LGBTQ plus community in the armed forces, and you look at what's been happening with females in the armed forces. Yeah, and I think the more support we can give, because I think it's the tip of the iceberg really in that conversation. It's a starting point, and at least it's starting, you know. And I think the more safe spaces we can offer and create for everyone within.
And I think it's something that, you know, in our work at Stand Easy that we've kind of wrestled with for a while, I think, and it's something that Dougie spoke about of how do we draw the line between allowing the banter that's really important in that veterans or ex-services community, but making sure that doesn't tip over into something that does feel discriminatory or does feel too far and makes some people not feel comfortable in that space. And I think that's something that we've kind of struggled with maybe for a long time, of thinking about what is that balance and how do we make sure people don't feel censored, but also other people feel comfortable coming into that space, and be that the veterans, but also our staff and our volunteers as well. And yeah, I thought that was an interesting conversation that Dougie brought up, that yes, banter is important, but we do have to acknowledge that sometimes we might say something and we might not like the response to what we say, and we have to accept that, and that it's not saying the thing that's bad as such. It's refusing to learn from things and refusing to take on feedback and learning. Yeah,
and you're always going to have your detractors. You're always going to have your keyboard warriors that just sprout stuff out there to go against the flow and come up with all sorts of stuff. I mean, one of the things I came across recently was, I know we'd spoken to Dougie and the work that Fighting a Pride had been doing, but online, and I know Dougie would have seen it as well. We talked about it off record, if you like, but with these keyboard warriors. But some of the guys, when they're looking back at getting their medals and they're looking to try and get, you know, their pensions, because when they were kicked out, they lost everything. And hopefully now that there will be political change and that will be rectified. But there's still people out there that go, well, they knew what the rules were. You know, they don't deserve it. And you just go, that's not the point. That's wrong. And also there would have been people that would join the military that didn't know their sexuality at the time. You know, so there's all these different variables, but people don't think about that. They just want to spraff, you know, their opinion on there, and they don't take into account the effect that has on so many others.
Yeah, I think, someone's banter can be so an insult to someone else. Do you know what I mean? And I think being respectful of people and being mindful of people, who's in the room, who are we talking to here, who's listening, is so important. And I think the more that we see sorry about this, Richard, but the more that we see more non-white males leading organisations and people being able to recognise, actually,
Why'd
there's
you
a woman
apologise
who's
to me?
leading this. Often we say males, white males in positions of authority.
Yeah.
So actually seeing other women like Pauline leading the Lothian Veterans Centre, I think that's brilliant.
Yeah,
because if you
absolutely.
recognise, if you see yourself in an organisation, like there's another woman or there's a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I'm going to feel more of an affinity there. I'm going to go into that organisation. But if we only ever just see the same
older
type of
white
people,
men,
then we're not being as inclusive. That's all I meant by that. It wasn't about you. Yeah, I think so. There's something about the other point you were making about just people being disrespectful of other people. I mean, kindness is such a easy word to say, but it can be so hard for some people just to be kind to one another.
And I think it kind of comes back to maybe something that Dougie said about when he was in the closet, so to speak, and hadn't come out as being gay, and he wasn't able to live as his authentic self, as he said, that was really showing up in his behaviour, and that I think he said himself, he wasn't really a very nice person. He was drinking a lot, he was getting into fights, and I was struck by the fact that he said nobody really asked him what was wrong and why he was doing that. And I think sometimes, we see people behaving badly or being hurtful, maybe refusing to change language or things like that, and maybe we have to sometimes think or ask, why is that person doing that? And rather than writing them off, I suppose we have to dig a bit deeper into that and think about where that's coming from, perhaps, if we can, and consider what is the thing that's making them behave in that way, and what's the thing that they're carrying with them, I suppose. And that kind of, I guess, approaching people with kindness and respect, even if they're not approaching you with kindness and respect.
Yeah. And I think as well, when we talk about institutions, when Dougie was talking about his experiences, he still served for 9 years after he could have come out and didn't come out. And that shows the impact that the institution, the military has had on his mindset, I suppose, where he felt that I can't come out even though I'm still in this position. And that must be a horrible thing to have to carry around. Knowing Dougie over the last few years, he has certainly become more free in himself over the years since I've known him.
Yeah.
And that can only be a positive thing for him. What was quite interesting as well was when I was up in Lewis was the different experiences that everyone had there. There'd been people that were born and bred, gone into the military and gone away again. There was people that had been in the military and found themselves in Lewis, be it, with a partner, what have you. And the fact that they do still have a good cadet system up there. It's great to hear all their stories, And again, cross generations there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a different experience, isn't it? Living and working and being in a rural community versus living and working in an urban community, or even mainland versus island. And like you were saying, when we were first kind of chatting about those conversations that you'd had, Richard, that there was thinking about, I suppose, why have these veterans found themselves in Lewis or in other rural or island communities, and do they want us to come there and get involved with them? And I suppose acknowledging that maybe some of those people have found themselves in those places because they want that peace and quiet, and they perhaps want to get away from some of the hustle and bustle and all the kind of pace of life that you find on the mainland. So
what was interesting was there was one chap that I spoke to, and he had moved up from Edinburgh, and it was his first time at the Breakfast Club, and he'd had his issues, since he had left the military. And I said to him, do you not feel quite isolated up here? And he said, no. He goes, the community here is really helpful. He goes, I felt more isolated in my flat on Leith Walk in the city. And I wasn't expecting that. I thought, if you're in the city, there's stuff to do, you can get out. He didn't get out his house. But he goes up there, it's a smaller community, he's come to the Breakfast Club, he's met some other veterans for the first time. It was just and he'd been up there, I think about 6 to 8 months at this point. And he was like, no, this is where I need to be.
Yeah, I think that's really, really rings true, having grown up in Shetland and worked there for some time and knowing a little bit about the veteran community there, that it is definitely a small, being in a smaller place, you often do feel less isolated because the community sense is stronger. And people notice if you're not following your normal routine, or, they take more of an interest in you perhaps, and find out what your background is and how you found yourself there, and that kind of thing. So I can completely see where that guy is coming from there.
And I guess, when they're in that smaller community, it is like a family for them.
Yeah. Because
we heard earlier as well, from Callum and that it was their partners that noticed something first.
Yeah.
They weren't aware of it, but they weren't aware of it, but they were certainly aware of it when their partner started mentioning it to them and said, this needs to change. So it's that whole, reflection. It's easy to have that. And I guess that's the same when you're up in the islands. The people around you will notice changes in your behaviour long before you do, and they'll probably just, get you out for a bacon roll or a wee chat or a walk or something. Yeah. Whereas I guess if you're in a city and you're isolated in your own house, there's no support there to help you with that.
And it all just comes back to community again, doesn't it? That, people, a lot of our contributors have spoken about joining the military looking for a family, looking to find a community and escape where they had found themselves previously, and then upon leaving, needing to find another community, another family, another form of escape sometimes. And I think it all comes back to that, doesn't it? We need to connect with people as humans and find those communities for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, you join the military, you have purpose, you form a family, and you form bonds that will never leave you. So it is your family in many respects. It's stronger than your family, because a lot of the time, dysfunctional families, and they don't necessarily have a strong family background, or a positive background really. And you suddenly go into the military and you're given that, and you're given skills, and you build your resilience, and then suddenly you leave and you go, okay, something that you've maybe not thought about for 8 or 20 odd years, whatever, suddenly hits you, the realization, you're like, I'm back. And you never learned to cope with it or deal with it the first time round, so it hits you further on down the line.
Now, obviously, like everything else, we had only limited time and budget to put together this podcast, and there are so many other partners in the Alliance that we didn't get a chance to speak to. And you said at the beginning, Linda, when you're introducing yourself, that the great thing about the Alliance is that the door is always open. So if there is someone out there who's running a charity or an organisation that is working with veterans or with families, how can they get involved? How can they find out more about what we do and how to come on board?
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, I think it's really important I can't emphasise enough that we are genuinely about wanting to work together. And it's not all about funding, it's just about us all coming together. And actually, it's not limited to just veterans organisations. So you might be working with veterans, but you're not a veteran-specific organisation, but you're interested in the Alliance. Do please get in touch with us. You might be working in the National Health Service. You might be working in some of our emergency services. Veterans are everywhere. They're a huge part of our society in Scotland. So if you're interested at all in working with veterans, getting to find out more about what we do, then please you can email me at l.irvinefitzpatrick@napier.ac.uk, or you can visit our website, which is svwa.org.uk.
I think it's really relevant as well there, Linda, that you mentioned it's not just has to be veterans charity organisations. I think it's very important that we do include and continue to include other third sector organisations, because a lot of veterans, when they've left the military, still might have a bad taste in the mouth and they don't want anything to do with the veterans organisations, but they will be engaging with third sector organisations. And I think that when we mentioned about finding the veterans that don't necessarily want to be found or harder to find, that's where you're going to find them, because they will be engaging with services elsewhere.
Absolutely. We're working with Health and Mind, who are an amazing organisation that work across Scotland with people who are experiencing mental health problems or emotional difficulties. Our partners, the Cyrenians, have been working with us for a number of years now. It's all about trying to build a sense of community.
Unfortunately, all things have to come to an end. We could sit here for hours talking and discussing everything, but we do have to move on. So thank you so much for joining us for this quick bonus episode of New Frontiers. We'll be doing another one of these to review the next 3 episodes, which are all well worth listening to.
And thanks so much to Linda for joining us. We'll speak to you again soon for the next one.
Thank you. Thank you both. Great to see you.
Thank you, Linda.
To find out more about Scotland's Veterans Wellbeing Alliance and the organisations supporting veterans across Scotland, visit svwa.org.uk.
New Frontiers is produced by Bespoken Media. Recording and editing is by Patrick Wallace, Katie Revel, Ailish Hunter and Dave Howard. And the music is Something New by the Eastern Plain. See you all next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye. Cheerio.
Produced by Bespoken Media.